This is a story about quests, a story about searches and seekers, pursuits and pursuers, discoveries and discoverers. This is a story about Gifford Scott, a man who dedicated much of his life to exploring the fingers of magnetism. It was an unlikely time for Scott's promising future to begin. It was a time of soup lines and social unrest. Survival was on the minds of most Americans. But as Gifford Scott later wrote,
I was hired by General Motors in the gutter of the Great Depression. I'm sure the only reason they took me on was because I offered to work for nothing. And they could see that I meant it. I wanted the experience. They hired me at $100 per month. A short time later, everyone took a 10% cut.
One of Scott's first assignments at GM was developing exhibits for the publicity section. It was during this period that Scott met the man who would send him on his quest.
I was working on an exhibit which sent music over a beam of light. I had my head down in the transmitting cabinet when the music suddenly stopped. I yelled out, "Who has their head in that light beam?" It was Charles Kettering. Can you imagine a kid fresh out of school talking to a vice president of GM like that?
Apparently, it didn't bother Kettering, who was known to his workers as Boss Ket. In fact, this initial meeting between Scott and Kettering was the beginning of a partnership that would last for decades. Boss Ket picked Scott for his pet project, one that he referred to as exploring the fingers of magnetism. Kettering had a tremendous curiosity about how electrical, magnetic, and gravitational forces behaved across space. He and Scott spearheaded the building of laboratory after laboratory, each one built in a new attempt to escape Earth's magnetic force. Each laboratory was equipped with instrumentation capable of providing more precise measurements. The efforts of Kettering and Scott paid off. Gyromagnetic measurements Einstein suggested decades earlier were finally proven. Magnetic measurements never before possible were achieved. For the first time, magnetic regions in a single crystal of iron were photographed. This enormous undertaking would have many applications. Scott also discovered the thermomagnetic gas torque, an outstanding achievement scientists would later refer to as the Scott effect. Papers were published. Plaudits came from the scientific community. At the possible highlight of his career, Scott was elected a Fellow of the American Physical Society. This fellowship is granted only to those whose research makes a significant contribution to the future of mankind. As Scott looked back over his career, however, he recalled something else as his crowning achievement.
I would like to express the great personal satisfaction which goes along with making an original discovery, of being the first person to delineate the parameters of a hitherto unknown aspect of nature. It goes far beyond monetary or recognitional rewards.
The rewards for mankind have been great. Through Scott's labors, a missing part of an equation was found, and magnetic resonance became possible. Scott's dedication to his research in magnetism elevates him to the status of other great scientists, and as a man whose contributions to mankind have provided benefits for us today and for future generations. Gifford Scott, a scientist, a seeker, a man with a quest.